Very good. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending our talk on the Indo-Pacific Mission Critical Success, the rapid deployment of trusted networks in private 5G and compromised environments. I need to correct my title because Dave, our friend here, corrected me. It should be potentially contested network environment. So I stand corrected with the word compromise. But anyway, I'd like to thank the panel here of joining us in this afternoon's talk. Later, I'll introduce them one by one. But here's my opening statement to kick off this session. I'll go straight to the point. The People's Republic of China is a real threat in the Indo-Pacific. I'm from the Philippines and I know how it is to live in a real threat. The continued and rapid rise of the PRC, or China, in terms of military cyber capabilities, chip manufacturing, and technological advancements presents a clear threat in the Indo-Pacific region. The telecom sector in the region is rapidly advancing with an expected investment of $259 billion by 2030 in 5G and broadband infrastructure. Chinese companies like Huawei have significant ground, particularly in 5G networks, undersea cables, and high-tech CCTV cameras. Just for you to have a background, Chinese companies like Huawei and ZTE have secured substantial portions of the global 5G market. Huawei alone controls 29% of the global 5G revenue. Huawei Marine Networks, which is the submarine cable network, has laid down 70,000 kilometers of undersea cables and has completed about 100 contracts in the Indo-Pacific. By next year, China aims to capture 60% of the world's fiber optic communications market. That's a huge number. And maybe our friends from Ericsson and Nokia maybe can add more to the global revenue of Huawei. So the US and the allies' responses. So as you know, the US administration has advanced or implemented the RIP and Replace programs and passing of the CHIPS Act of 2023. Additionally, the Pacific Deterrence Initiative, or PDI, plays a crucial role with a budget of $9.9 billion for fiscal year 2025, focusing on the U.S. force posture, military readiness, and joint operations with allies and deter aggression in the region. So strong alliances such as the Quad, US, Australia, India, and Japan, and partnerships with countries like the Philippines, my hometown, Japan, South Korea, and Australia form the backbone of U.S. allies or U.S. strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific. So I'd like to introduce the panel, and maybe very quick, you can quickly introduce yourself. My name is Christian Pura. I'm the Managing Director of the Now Group and the Trusted Network Alliance. I am based in Seattle, a member of ASEA Pacific Northwest, but hail from the Philippines. So I'd like to maybe move to this next. Maybe Dave, you can quickly introduce yourself.
Thanks, Christian. So I was a late invite to the panel. Thanks to the FCA president here. Dave McDonald, I'm the CIO, Plans and Programs Director up at the Naval Computer and Telecommunications Area Master Station, which is here on island, up in the center of Oahu. I'm a lifetime FCA member. As long as I can remember, and a Hawaii FCA member going back 20 years since I got here in 2004. So NICTAM's PAC, I'm a Department of Navy civilian, we're a Navy organization, but we're truly joined in national and very much involved in coalition, bilateral, allied partners, command and control services, networks, and capabilities. So as the CIO up there, I look out across Indo-Pacific, and we have a large organization that's distributed across this hemisphere. So it's in the operations, maintenance, maneuver, runtime, cybersecurity, and defense of all of that critical infrastructure. Again, national, joint, coalition. command and control, to fleet network, to shore network, to RF systems, HF, VLF. We run SATCOM gateways. So it's a massive enterprise. I've been through 8 COs up at NICTAMS, and when they come in, the first thing I tell them is, shipmate, every day, at least one thing will break. Some days 4 or 5 things will break, and not everything's an emergency. So we're in that business. We're in the operations and maintenance of critical network and telecom services across the industry. It's a never dull moment. That's where all this gray hair.
Thank you, David. Steve, please.
Hey everybody, Steve Vogelstein. I'm the CTO for Nokia Federal Solutions. Nokia Federal Solutions is a wholly owned subsidiary of Nokia. Our mission is very simple and straightforward. We want to take that investment that Nokia is making every year in building telecommunications equipment, wireless, 5G, fiber optical transmission, routers, you name it, and see how we can bring that to the mission for the U.S. DoD and U.S. government, broader U.S. government. That's what we do every day. So we try to figure out, we want to make sure that there's a leverage of that investment, dual use technology, kind of help bring that to the fight.
Thank you, Steve. Chris?
Yeah, Christopher Lang. I lead Ericsson Federal, which is also a wholly owned subsidiary of Ericsson. I guess you get the gist now about how serious industry is taking this whole situation. It's very interesting that I think in the industry itself, the competition that's going on now, I think mention was made about previously about Huawei, is really becoming an existential threat, right? Because in many ways, companies like Nokia and Ericsson are not just competing against Huawei, they're actually competing against the national government. And the race is on to really see who owns the global infrastructure and what parts of it. So that there is a big effort going on right now about the strategy associated with that. There's also efforts underway right now, and what I'm particularly interested in is finding out how we can apply 5G in the military environment to give us a competitive advantage, because we're not going to be able to outscale the Chinese as we've done in the past with some of the other adversaries. We have to out-innovate them.
Okay, perfect. Well, on my side, so again, I'm Christian Pura from Now Telecom. So we are the 4th mobile operator in the Philippines, and we are the only operator that has 0 Chinese equipment. And like our chairman here is also here. Later we can talk about that. But we are the only operator with 0 Chinese, and the U.S. government has actually partnered with us to advance trusted networks in the Philippines. As you know, the U.S. military has already expanded its presence in the Philippines, and we're hoping to also strengthen the military bases. So now the session is really very informal. If you have questions, just throw it right at us. But I'd like to kick off this session by asking the entire panel first. Well, let's go straight to the point. Given the presence of potentially contested networks in the Indo-Pacific region, what are the unique challenges and requirements of deploying secure communication networks, especially where U.S. military bases are located in the Indo-Pacific region? So we have friends from the U.S. Air Force, I think from South Korea. So obviously all of you guys know there's Japan, South Korea, Philippines has expanded, U.S. has expanded its presence in the Philippines. So what would be the main unique challenges and requirements of deploying secure communication networks where U.S. military bases are located in the Indo-Pacific region? I think, Dave, you are the best resource person to kick off this panel.
Some first principles, I think, before I get to the challenges, vulnerabilities, threats, and the issue of contested versus compromised and so forth. A first principle that I have in the deployment of any C2 package or C2 capability starts working from the mission on back, right? So it's performability, assurance, reliability, scalability often is a very critical concern if it's an uncertain mission that's going to move in different directions. So you've got to build to that and posture yourself for that first. As I was talking earlier today with somebody kind of best to think through those scenarios, you know, before the crisis starts, right? So you don't want to have failures of imagination with respect to those criteria of a critical ecosystem, a system of systems that you need to have in place to meet a contingency fight or escalate into a no-kidding military crisis, a war. So it's first key not to lose sight of those first principles. Now having said that, the next dimension of this, I think, which is a key theme of our discussion today, which is allies, partners, and sort of how do you get into the murky territory of rapid deployment, rapid positioning with allies and partners. Could be a bilateral, it could be a multilateral. You kind of don't always know ahead of time, right? You got to be sort of ready and think through those scenarios. So challenges. You know, if you may be going out forward somewhere to operate through extant commercial infrastructure. It could be sort of indigenous, native, you know, in situ commercial infrastructure. So the term operate through, you know, not only applies within our own domestic world, where we talk about these kind of hybrid, private, public, you know, infrastructures, telecom infrastructures, 5G or extensible wireless connected back into wired. That model also applies when you go forward into sort of a less known, less predictable, more contested, or even a potentially compromised part of the world. And then you have a decision matrix you got to get through pretty quick, which is, am I willing to take the risk of operating through contested or compromised infrastructure? And that's, you know, that's a decision right up front you got to figure out. Now here's the good news. Here's the good news. The U.S., all of our MILDEPs, and I work for the Navy, right, so I have deep knowledge of how the Navy does this. Over a period of years, decades really, we've made the issue of rapid flyaway C2 packages pretty routine. We're really good at it. Not necessarily specific to 5G. If you plow into PMW 790 over in San Diego, you know, they have an entire acquisition directorate within 790 that does nothing but expeditionary systems. They have 20 or 25 form factors, from the smallest man pack to the largest command post with tents and generators and so forth, and everything in between. The other services likewise, right? So the question is, how do you bring your sort of lesser capable allied partners along for that ride, and either share those expeditionary rapid deployed capabilities, or get them to cultivate their own programs to build and integrate those things in a fast fight. So those are the key challenges. Embedded in all that is, of course, how do you share zero trust standards, right? Whether it's build to continuous ATO, vulnerability management, log management, all those things that are embedded in the term zero trust. How do you handle encryption when perhaps a lot of our encryption techniques are not releasable at all, right? So you make some balanced, compromised decisions about how you share those type of deployable systems with allied partners. Affordability is a factor for some of our partners. You know, some of our less developed, less capable partners. You don't want to bring a gold-plated Lamborghini sort of thing out there and then partner with 2 or 3 allied partners who just can't play. They can't buy the endpoint equipment. They can't, you know, build the knock-sock infrastructure on their side of the equation. So those are all considerations we've got to be very thoughtful about. And then how the thing operates in runtime. Is it shared? How do we govern runtime, network maneuver, embedded defensive cyber, information assurance compliance, vulnerability management? How do we respond to a cyber incident that is extant on the network? How do we do that jointly across an allied or allies and partners team in any instance? With specific respect to 5G, the really good news is 3GPP is an international participatory standards body. The ORAN Alliance is the same. Our DoD has published, and our NIST, our National Institute for Standards and Technology, have published reference architectures and fairly precise standards for the right way to build, you know, any kind of 5G, future G, or terrestrial, non-terrestrial wireless network. So it's not great mystery there, and we will lead, and then we'll have to figure out the challenges and the compromises we have to make. So that's Good, good, good.
Steve, yes, please.
Sure, I expand on some of that. Maybe give a perspective from an OEM that makes equipment. I think when we think about this challenge of how do we build secure networks, the first step is to build security into the equipment from the ground up. So we want to know that we've got the tools in the equipment so that we can secure it. The 3GPP standards, really 5G to me is the first generation that focused on security in a meaningful way. Prior to that, the goal was really for an MNO to get people connected to the network. And all they really cared about is who are you and what billing plan are you on, so we can make sure that you're going to pay us. 5G added a layer of security that locked things down in a meaningful way that I think changes the security posture for a private network where we can say, yeah, there's an appropriate level of security. It's not everything you need. You still need to think about some other things, but it's a good, secure infrastructure. And then when you think about deploying forward, and I think you hit on it with some of the kits, operating through is a necessity at times, but if you can bring your equipment with you, you can bring a private network that you control which SIMs are in there. Anytime you're attaching to a public network, you got to be super careful what you're doing. It's a little bit easier to do that as a backhaul because we have techniques where we can encrypt, we can do CSFC, we can have layers of obfuscation so that we can't even tell what we're connecting to. So there's ways to handle backhaul, but for that last mile, it's important to bring that with you. So we put a big emphasis on how do we build 5G kits that can deploy tactically, that have the right capabilities. How do we operate them in an environment that's secure so you're not exposing yourself? We've done a bunch of work in those areas. And then looking at the broader portfolio of equipment that Nokia makes, we make routers, we make optical transport, we build AES-256 encryption into that kit so that we can secure that data with, again, an open standard that, we can work with a coalition partner. If you want to set up a secure connection, you can do that. And you hit on a really good point about 3GPP standards. When we think about working with coalition partners, we've been in various exercises. It's very tough to bring along these exquisite radios that are built for the DoD. You're not just going to hand those out to your partners. But what your partners do have is they've all got cell phones. And we can't hand out SIMs to them and get them connected into a common environment and then decide how much of the mission environment can they access. Maybe it's just for training exercise, but it simplifies that problem because of that ecosystem and the openness and the standards.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Chris?
We talk about trusted networks just as the network itself, but I think there's a really much bigger question. One of the big focuses that everybody's been talking about recently is the use of artificial intelligence, right? How does that actually work? How will it be so important going forward? We look at what's going on in Ukraine today, right? We can see the effect that drones are having and what a big push there's going on right now for us to develop autonomous systems. If you think about the evolution of these autonomous systems and how they're managed, and the strategies that are developed that we can employ them in a meaningful way, all of that happens through artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence only works as good as the data sets that they have, and the data sets have to be minimal latency, right? So the predictive ability of the artificial intelligence really rests on the quality of the data. The quality of data really rests on input from all the sensors around it. And so the network is not just a thing in and of itself that we need to trust. It's the largest piece of vulnerability that exists in the entire military organization today. And so focusing on how to develop it and evolve it is critically important because all the other money spent on all the other things will never come to any real value if we can't maintain the network and operate it in a trusted fashion. And if you think about that, and I would draw an analogy back to cyber, right? It's really a cat and mouse game. I mean, whether we have adversarial components on the network, or even if we don't, the network is always going to be a target. It's always going to be under stress. So the ability is to maintain an awareness of what's on the network, what can be done about it, how we can morph the network or change it in a meaningful way, and how that network is dynamic enough to accommodate whatever the changes are on the battlefield close to real time.
Okay, perfect. So just to focus in on this topic as well. So Dave, we talked about, I think last Wednesday, about this topic. Ideally, within the U.S., you have U.S. telcos, typical Verizon, T-Mobile, and AT&T, and Dish. But outside of the U.S., you have partners like maybe Rakuten or SK Telecom. And ideally also that the other countries would have like-minded telco operators. So what do you think, or what would your view in terms of, let's say, in terms of the Philippines or in Thailand, what would be the operating environment, or at least the solutions that you can think of to cure the lack of the trusted network in these environments? Especially that the U.S. military is expanding greatly in the Pacific.
Yeah, so I'm going to try to swing way above my pay grade a little bit for a minute or two here, and also try to cast it in the positive, right? A lot of challenges to overcome there, first of all, right? So this is this is a simple kind of equation or a simple solution, we likely would have been well down the road on it, whether it's for 5G builds or for terrestrial, non-terrestrial, sort of integrated system of systems, C2 systems. And the other challenge is it's kind of different equation for every partner, right? Depending on the trust relationship. We've got Five Eyes, right, in the Anglosphere. We've got extended partners throughout Indo-Pacific. And then you have any other potential partners that might, by happenstance, fall their way into some kind of crisis or a fight. And you need to kind of figure that out partner by partner. But again, kind of swinging above my pay grade, here's kind of the good news. The good news is our DoD CIO staff in recent years has published to the world, right, open source to the world, has published a compendium of really rigorous standards, reference architecture type of documents, NIST-derived zero trust criteria, design and build for continuous ATO, for integrated SOC, and for security orchestration, automation, and response, right? Some of those commercial off-the-shelf technologies that make up what would be a comprehensive zero trust design. Identity management, machine-to-machine credentialing and authentication, right? So not to go too far down the rabbit hole there, but the United States and our DoD have been sort of ridiculously transparent to the world. I might mention tangentially also to our adversaries, but to all those partners out there, there's no mystery. In a few mouse clicks, they can dig into reference architectures, technical standards, protocols, APIs, data standards. They're invited to all of the standards bodies. Where we could go further, and this was the subject of a DoD-sponsored acquisition reform study. I wish I could remember the name of the study off the top of my head, but I think you can Google it. And it had the particular focus of how our defense acquisition community reaches out more robustly to partner acquisition communities and engineering organizations in order to foster coalition and combine innovation and test. Let me give you an example of how that could look. 5-6 years ago, the OSD-R&E decided to park about $600 million in 5G, tranche 1, tranche 2, and some other vulnerability testing and all of the experiments. I think we've done 14 experiments over about a 5-year window. The biggest one was out here in Hawaii under Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam. What if we had on the front end of that reached out as a starting point to our Five Eyes partners and said, let's do half of these entirely together? What if we had reached out on the front end of that with partners like Japan, or South Korea, or India, and said, let's do a few of these together and angle them toward use cases, crisis response, conflict, up to and including surge to war. Let's run these through coalition experiments and make the deployed platforms coalition platforms. Now there's a thought, right? So that's the kind of mindset, again, swinging above my pay grade. If I were a DoD CIO for a week, your boss, or if I were OSD A&S, right? Or if I were in the work.
Is it cheap?
Well, we're gonna learn our way in, right?
Okay.
I'll tell you what's not cheap is legacy heavy infrastructure, 5E switches that are no longer supported, miles and miles and miles of copper, and collapsing fiber conduit, And every time the 72-strand copper cable gets cut by a barge out here in Pearl Harbor, you know, it's a $2 million problem.
That's correct.
Yeah, all things are relative, right?
Okay, we have 8 minutes left because I have a 2-minute story to share. But any questions on the floor first? Any questions on the floor? Yes, sir. Yeah. If you can, can you use the mic? Also, if you're what organization and the question.
Maximum Elysius Networks, maybe some of you guys have heard of us, right?
Sure have.
Of course, yeah.
So doing a lot with Nellis Air Force Base on the dual use spectrum. My question is around who should own the governance for spectrum in countries that we're going to deploy capability to. What we thought was when OUSD started up the program, the first thing we should have figured out is how do we leverage open spectrum in a specific sovereign nation that we're going to do it. So my question is, who do you guys think should govern spectrum
Go ahead, Steve. I can share mine.
That's a complicated question.
But it's a barrier to entry for the greatest capability of all time.
I mean, spectrum, you hit on spectrum, even Kona's spectrum is a challenge, right? And so getting to what you just painted, right, that's not going to be done in a single way. That's going to involve all the major MNOs showing up with their spectrum and figuring out how to activate the spectrum on base in a way that works for the DoD. It's going to involve using DoD spectrum. There are some bands that DoD has. It's going to involve CBRS and other things. When you go CONUS, I mean, the U.S. government doesn't control that spectrum. Now, maybe there's an agreement on base where we can do more flexible things, but you still have to be very careful. You're bumping up against commercial networks. You know, you can't create interference and all those sort of things. So spectrum flexibility is a must, right? We can't, there's no one size fits all. We have to be very flexible. We have to figure out increasingly how can we share spectrum more effectively. We've done a bunch of work on that and going back to these experiments. We did a big experiment at Hill Air Force Base looking at dynamic spectrum sharing techniques. I think we have to get better at that.
Dave brought a good point, if you don't mind interjecting. So Dave brought a phenomenal point about the tranche efforts, right? So the tranche effort, if we would have looked more at partner-based interoperability as an effort, then we could have worked with the partner nations as part of the effort to build TTPs on how, if we bring the capability to them as a partner, you know, force multiplier to build common power, then we could have figured out collectively with the partner force how do we leverage their spectrum.
So at the risk of sounding like a government bureaucrat and or something of a Google genius, so just on instinct, I just Googled FCC International, just for fun. Sure enough, FCC has an International Affairs Bureau. There's a whole organization with FCC. I would guess if I did an NTIA International, that would pop up too. So I don't want to go too far here because, you know, government bureaucracies, I kind of have no idea what they're doing, but I'm pretty sure they have a charter to be able to reach out. You know, and I would imagine FAA as well with partner, you know, because they have so much radiation hazard deconfliction things they have to do with radars and FAA and flight safety and so forth. So probably many elements of our government that get involved in spectrum policy, including DoD spectrum under the DoD CIO, have international outreach. I don't know if you can attest, but I would think DoD CIO's spectrum office has international engagement, you know, sort of discussions on a routine basis to kind of sort out what are we able to do in routine peacetime in different parts of the world, and then what will we be able to provision when we go to some crisis, whether it's a you know, sort of humanitarian assistance to disaster relief or some other contingency where we get involved and are asked to come support, or it's a full-out war where I don't want to be quoted as saying all bets are off in a war. But yeah, kind of. Yeah, that's right. You know, let's get out of the way we're radiating is kind of how a war would go. But the good point I think here is that our government has a lot of horizontal reach in terms of spectrum policy in all parts of the world.
If you ask ASMO and you say, I want to let them light up in the pristine commercial frequency that 5G offers, they say, where's the 1494? And you say, well, you don't handle 1494s because you're not the NTIA and you're that way that doesn't go.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be trivial about this, but, and I think the point was well made by Steve. You know, even in domestic regions and markets and on military bases, you know, spectrum deconfliction, spectrum licensing, and RAD has, right? The DoD has a radiation EMI, you know, Hero, Earth, and all that kind of stuff that I think a lot of you are familiar with. Man, you got to go through the wickets. You know, if you're going to radiate anything, we had to do that with all of our 5G pilots. We do it. You start putting Starlinks on buildings, you're doing a RAD-HAZ thing first. Right, especially on bases like that have airfields and that have other RF systems that are critical to warfighting and so forth. And, you know, we've got a lot of those. So RAD-HAZ is a big deal. If any industry partner here has not read the DoD RAD-HAZ directive, Google it. You can find it. It's not fun. It's not fun. It's like RMF.
So just to answer quickly on that, in our model in our telecom Philippines, so the frequency belongs to the telecom because it's the frequent asset, right? But what we did, we partnered with the U.S. defense contractor, and that U.S. defense contractor is the end client, is the U.S. DoD. And then we formed a partnership with them whereby the frequency is ours because it is assigned to us. And then we help them get the necessary permits because we are a telco, the sovereign telco. And then obviously the DoD and end client, which is the end client. So that's the partnership model
So
that
back
we
to my
have.
question though, should the government be on us industry guys to work out industry agreements between us, OCS as a new contractor
With the local MNO, yes.
Or should that be regulated by the federal government?
Well, I'm not sure on how the Fed, well maybe my chairman, my boss it's above my pay grade already, so.
That's what we're doing with the Trusted Network Alliance for all the Indo-Pacific countries that are part of that IPPF. What we've done is we tell the contractor in the Philippines, bring the equipment, diplomatic pouch, we take care of the rest.
Right.
So we've successfully done that in the Philippines. So you don't have to worry about frequency or permits. Now we want to do that in each country under the Indo-Pacific. So use us, tell us which country. We trade our frequencies with the Indians because they want to install something. We're with the Rakuten guys of Japan. So it's a currency that we're now leveraging for the U.S. military.
And just if you look, colors what the DoD CIO 5G cross-functional team their approach, and this 3 lines of effort, right? First line of effort is get the MNOs to bring capacity on base, right? And so that comes with spectrum. Spectrum's not a problem; it's already there. Second line of effort is then, okay, how do we leverage that infrastructure for private networking use cases? Whether that's going to be MoCA and whether it's going to be splicing, I think we still need to figure that out. So it's not going to be regulated. There's already regulations in place. We're going to figure out how do we architect smart networks that fit in the current regulations and solve the mission.
Yeah, keep that model and figure out how to do that. I think we set the model for
So Matt, congratulations, you stumped the panel. We have to go to the audience.
No worries, no worries.
Got it.
Maybe last question before my 1 minute short story. Last question on the floor. No one? Okay. So again, I hail from the Philippines. All of you guys have watched CNN, what's happening on the West Philippine Sea. I'd like to share this story. If you remember in 2016, the Philippines won a historic ruling against our friendly neighbor China, right? We all remember that, okay? Dr. Rajiv knows this story. But our chairman bought this ancient map. It's a 300-year-old ancient map that was prepared by a Jesuit priest in the 1734. It's a 300-year-old 1734 called Murillo de Larde map. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the mother of all Philippine maps, also the first scientific map of the Philippines. But the original was bought by our chairman, my uncle, and this map was used as the main evidence against China. And that's the reason why why Philippines won against our case against the West Philippines, in the West Philippines. So this is the map, and you can see here, I cannot I think I can zoom in. But this map, just to show to you, if you see the cursor, this is the Scarborough Shoal and the Spratly Islands. And this debunked the 9-dash line that China has been trying to put out in the media. So this was used as main evidence, and the Philippines won against China. So this is a story that I want to share. Now, I cannot provide each and every one a copy, but I have 30 copies with us right now, and like each of you, maybe one per company would have this. So this is our sign of our friendship with the United States and allies and allied organizations. Philippines is small. We are eager to fight China, but we need the support of everyone. So I'd like to really, of course, each panel will get a copy of each, but I have limited 30. If you want to grab a copy, we have a copy. Each of you will have a copy. So again, thank you very much for attending our panel, and thank you. I think last 5-second words of, but yeah.
The future is wireless.